Well, this is a terrific conversation that we have lined up for you. I think many of us have hopes that technology, healthcare will improve over time. And obviously, there's a bit of a pre-pandemic, post-pandemic conversation to be had. But the topic here is transforming healthcare, the AI opportunity. Let me introduce you to our guests on stage. Takayuki Morita, the CEO of NEC. Kai-Fu Lee, who is the chairman and CEO of Sinovation Ventures. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, first up, I just want to talk a little bit about the potential for the healthcare industry if it adopts artificial intelligence. I want to start narrow and focus on how it is playing out in your own companies first up. And if we think about from the concept of NEC, you've revealed in September last year that you're creating a healthcare and life sciences business using AI and other digital technology. Just tell us about some of those exciting projects behind the scenes so far.
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of things changing this world and changing the pharmaceutical world. One thing is that the project of human genome project, and that is the providing like a whole, like a gene informations into the digital. So that all the doctors and the scientists can use those gene informations as a part of their data. That is a big difference from the past. And secondly, the advancement of AI. As you probably recall, 2012, the Google released the machine learning, distinguish cats without teaching. So these two things sort of enables us to use gene informations and data as a part of this medical and the drug industries, so that we are entering into this field.
Dr. Lee, to you, let's talk about what you're up to at Sinovation. You're a subsidiary of NEC specializing in biotech. Can you just give us an example of what you're focused on and how this can alter the healthcare industry as we know it?
Certainly. Sinovation is best known for our investments in artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence really began in China, first with the internet companies, and then with banks and insurance, basically whoever has data. And that was the subject of my first book, AI Superpowers. And healthcare is the next big area because healthcare is being digitized, right? With wearable computing, multi-omics, digital pathology and radiology, everything's becoming digital. And human doctors just cannot have the full inventory of all the data about any individual, nor can they keep up with all the treatments that are coming up. So we see basically AI being applied to every aspect of medicine. I'll give a few quick examples. One is just using AI for diagnosis. In particular, with radiology and pathology, is already better than human doctors, not in general, but for specific illnesses. Secondly, AI for drug discovery. We have an investment called In Silico Medicine that has invented 2 drugs that are small molecule drugs that can basically cure very difficult diseases like pulmonary fibrosis and kidney fibrosis. And this is invented by AI, having read a lot of papers and clinical trial results, knowing how to pursue these. And we see even bigger opportunity with large molecule, potentially peptide drugs that humans have a hard time inventing, that AI can do massive, high-volume, data-driven experiments and come up and propose drugs that have a much higher likelihood of passing clinical trial. So we're very excited about that. Also, we're very excited about AI in robotics, robotic surgery. We know about the intuitive surgical Da Vinci, but we also see that Da Vinci is still operated by a human. And more of this will be done autonomously with higher accuracy and safety. We've looked at areas like tooth implant, ways of doing basically eye-related surgery, and also spinal surgery, all performing better than doctors. So that's another area. And advanced medical devices are outputting digital signals, right? PCR and genetic sequencing. This is all data that's digital and can be accumulated. Of course, one trick is, human data privacy is an issue. But there are ways to deal with that. Our current way is we invested in a product for pet blood testing. And in that, we can gather a lot of data. And I'm sure our companies will demonstrate this will do a lot better diagnosis than veterinarians, thereby giving more confidence that AI can work for even diagnosis.
We'll dig into consumer protections in just a minute, but I want to get to the broader landscape. Before the pandemic, it felt as though there were challenges around trust, that healthcare companies didn't necessarily want to bring too much technology into the businesses because they were concerned about how their data was going to be used. Customers themselves did not want to hand over information because they were worried insurance companies would end up with that data and then penalize them down the track. But we've seen during the pandemic that connected health was one of the answers.
Yes.
We saw a sort of fast forwarding of the evolution in connected health. How would you describe where we are now positioned around AI and healthcare because of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that before the pandemic, we already have some basis for sharing the data and sharing the errors and mistakes, sharing that all the information. That is a kind of meanings of Human Genome Project. And through that project, we clarified all the information of the humans, and we realized that we can digitize all the human bodies. And so that through that project, people learn how important for us to share the information. And as you said, like pandemic things, the first things in this history, we saw like people are working together and to cope with single disease, right? And then in order to do that, we are sharing the information. We experienced some difference with the regulations. We realized that we need to overcome those things. In order to do that, we really need to share those information. That is, I think, that the lesson learned through the COVID-19.
Dr. Lee, to you, what do you think the implications have been of the pandemic, particularly around AI and healthcare?
Yes, I think pandemic has really created a very strong focus on healthcare, that we must do more, we must innovate faster, and AI-assisted drug invention and in the future invention of new vaccines, I think will definitely accelerate that. So I think AI as an accelerator will be looked upon favorably because of the greater urgency, and we see that time to market for vaccines are ever more important. So that's one side, and then you mentioned about data kind of issues. I think there are a number of ways to address privacy issues. Probably the most promising and universal is a set of technologies called privacy computing. And as an example, I'll illustrate, let's say there are 100 hospitals, each have 1,000 patients, and you'd love to aggregate these 100,000 patients, but maybe my company wants to access that, but none of the patients will want me to see their data. The federated learning as a privacy computing approach would basically say your AI will run in each of the 100 hospitals, to which data has already been licensed. Then the 100 hospitals will have 100 models that are aggregated back to my AI startup. Then I would essentially be training my AI on all 100,000 people without ever seeing any of their data because the training was done in the local hospital. So I think this type of privacy computing can be universally applied because, as we know, different countries have different requirements. But there are also other ideas that should all be pursued because for AI, data really is everything. There are ways of anonymizing data so they can be used by other people. That's another way. There are also interesting ideas like when people in the US, when they go to DMV and then they get a license, they indicate that if they die, their organs can be donated. I think why don't we put another tick, right? If people die, they can donate all their data. Any privacy issues posthumously shouldn't matter.
I'll come back at you around some of the challenges, but Morita-san, you want to come in here?
Yes, I think as he said, we need to distinguish two things: is the patient information and also the data for the academic use and also researches. And those things have to be open data. And anonymity is a very key, and to make use of those data for people. And through the making those informations available to everybody, and we can enjoy the innovations and technology advancement. And I think that's what is happening right now.
Can I bring up data storage, though? We've seen missteps from social media companies, for instance. They effectively have mismanaged the use of that data storage. This is not data that's even that useful in many ways. But when we talk about medical data, I think many of us feel that we would not want it out there in the public arena, even though there could be a veil of secrecy around data gathering using data sets. How do you store and protect the data that you're collecting?
So the example I gave earlier with federated learning would basically leave things the way they are, because each of us has our data with our hospital. And the hospital is fully licensed to use our data within the hospital on their data center, their server, so that doctors can access it. So I would recommend for people with that kind of concern, just leave the data with the hospital, and we need to build up hospitals so they can have good computers that can run AI there. That's I think the most safest form of protection.
Do you want to come on this? Cyber attacks still an issue, concerns by a lot of industry watchers that medical AI companies don't have a strong understanding of data protection. What do you say to that?
I think that cybersecurity and the protection is always have to be considered in this type of things. And that is we can't avoid any kind of accident. So we always have to be prepared for when things happens, and then we can segregate the data and close the data, and then take care of that afterwards. That kind of procedures and the policies have to be established.
I want to bring up regulation from a slightly different angle, because there are differences in regulation based on jurisdiction. I mean, if we bring up China, for instance, the ability to gather data sets and put that information together to come up with AI outcomes versus, say, in the United States, the data is really just down to one single hospital, very limited amount of data that can be collected. Is regulation standing in the way of better healthcare?
I think regulation can stand in the way. In my opinion, the US HIPAA laws are too restrictive. We do want to protect and honor each person's privacy. That data should only be usable by the licensee and for the right purposes. But the restrictiveness and the requirement for extra consent blocks the usage of larger data sets. So I think in China, there are laws that protect the patient privacy, but don't go as far as HIPAA. And also, I think another advantage of China is that hospitals are larger. The largest hospital has like 20 times more beds than the largest American hospital. And also, Chinese hospitals are very specialized. Because Chinese medicine is not as good as American, usually you need one super hospital that's got expert in neurology or brain science or some other area. So the whole country, when they have troubled cases, submitted to that hospital. So the hospitals in China are actually extremely rich in resources, in the size of data sets by a factor of 20, but also as experts from all the other hospitals submitted to them. So I think that's an advantage for China to develop AI, because if you work with hospitals, the kind of data they have are more extensive. And China's protection of privacy, in my opinion, is for medical purposes, is adequate, but not excessive.
Morita, do you think regulation is presenting a roadblock to better healthcare for populations?
I think that consulting regulations among the country is most important. As I said, and personalized and the patient's information have to be protected. But at the same time, modeling what we see in the genome project, and most of the DNA informations, most of the modeling informations are common to all the human beings. And those informations, and which is contributing to the science and advancement of the modeling, have to be shared. And in order to do that, and probably we need like a concerted approach among the countries. And I think including China and also including Japan, and that kind of things we really need.
I want to bring up the financing regime. We've all been watching a tech rout play out on stock markets globally. No one's really been immune, whether you're in the United States, in Silicon Valley, or whether you're based in Shenzhen. We've seen very big impact on the psychology around technology, regulation in China also having an impact when it comes to tech in China. Do you think this is a setback for AI in healthcare?
Okay, I'll answer first. Absolutely not. I think China does have tech regulations, which has impacted some tech stocks. But keep in mind, these are primarily internet tech platforms. So Alibaba, Tencent, ByteDance, and others similar to Google, Amazon, and Facebook. What is happening is that China's internet environment has not been as heavily regulated as US and EU, which to the positive side meant these companies could grow fast, but also they grew so fast, they now have so much data with the super apps gaining so much power. And I think it's just a realization that super apps that occupy 70% of somebody's online time is very powerful, and the consumers need to be protected from them. And that's what happened with the tech policies. But China is very much supportive of deep tech.
What about venture capitalists, though?
So venture capitalists need to shift from internet apps and platforms that want to be to deep tech. That would be a much better proposition. Partly because the internet space in China has already been saturated. Plus now the regulations are comparable to US and EU. There is no unique advantage anymore. Deep tech, however, is very important to China because of the need for self-sufficiency in light of the US-China situation. So the Chinese government encourages deep tech, and deep tech obviously includes things like quantum, AI, robotics, new energy, but a very central piece of deep tech is healthcare, life science, synthetic biology, and genetic sequencing, genetic editing. These are really advanced technologies that will change the future of human race. And China intends to be a leader in this space, and it has been playing catch up, but it has grown a lot. So I think the government will want more VCs to invest in these deep tech spaces, including AI healthcare, and not as much in the internet platform companies.
Morita, if you take a look at the action we've seen in the big Wall Street technology names, some of them are down 50 to 70%. We know that changes the appetite to take on risk. And some of these ventures, as we talk about AI, can require a fairly significant amount of cash in the startup and growth phase. Do you think that there is a setback because of the volatility we've witnessed on the markets?
To tell the truth, the deep tech doesn't require a huge capital, I think. And I wanted to hear your opinions, but we are doing a lot of the testing and of dry type of the AI application in the field of the neoantigen predictions and so on for the cancer curings. But in a first phase, before the manufacturing significant and blockbuster type of the medicines, required cash and required capital is not significant. So I think that the biggest investment is brain and time. So I think once that they revealed that the probabilities of the success and chance, then we are going to have some sort of collaboration schemes, and that part probably requires a more huge investment and cash and to produce the huge amount of the medicines and so on.
Can I bring up bias in AI? The type of algorithms that have been created has triggered concerns that we are seeing bias. Certain demographics are coming up with those algorithms. How do you tackle bias when it comes to AI in healthcare?
Well, a lot of the reports about bias comes from data imbalance. So when you train with a lot of data from men, not enough from women, it will do well on men and not women, and things like that. These are easily avoidable by having tools that check for balance and sufficiency of the data sets, as well as education by AI engineers that their job isn't just to get the best result, make the most money, but they have to make sure it's fair. So I think with enough emphasis by tools companies, by companies that employ these engineers, I think these issues can be overcome. I actually also haven't heard bias as a big issue for healthcare. So I think probably a bigger issue for healthcare is explainability, right? Why did you give me that drug? Or why did you recommend this? Or why did my surgery not go well? And who is accountable if there are, God forbid, fatalities that result? And I think these issues are perhaps the most pressing.
I wanted to make one comment in addition to what he said. And I think that's his bias is a data quality issue, data quantity issue. So make the data available as much as we can, and that bias has to be diminishing. So that bias basically created by some sort of intentional actions, and also that poor quality of the data. So as long as we keep the quality of the data, that issue is resolving over the time. What do you think?
I agree, definitely.
From the conversation points we've had so far, I can see that both of you can see out to the horizon. If we talk about 5 years down the line, how will the consumer, how will the patient see the AI in healthcare? How different will things be?
My opinion is that one of the challenges of AI adoption is the fundamental differences of thinking by the medical community and the AI community. The AI community tends to think in statistics, that if this drug helps save 1,000 lives, but it hurts 500 lives, that's a win. But the medical community would be aghast at that kind of comment because the 500 lives lost could have been prevented with human in the loop. So I think the two communities need to work together. So as optimistic as I am about AI healthcare, I think this cultural difference will impede the progress in the area of diagnostics, because that's where directly you come into the confrontational issue that I just discussed. The human doctor will, and the human processes will want to not let AI jump in so fast and take over from humans, and also explainability, accountability issues. So I think from a patient standpoint, I don't think there will be AI doctors in the 5 years. There can be, the technology is there, but there won't be for these reasons. But it will take longer. But I think what will happen is behind the scenes, using existing platforms for improved accuracy of radiology with tools, improved drug discovery. So I think the medical process will feel much like it does today, but AI will have been a workhorse that will improve safety, improve survival rate, improving efficacy, without the patient feeling a lot of difference.
Yeah, I wanted to mention two things. And medical is going to be more personalized. So a lot of the informations of genes, and also the treatment of the result, and errors, and also the experiences, all the information will be accumulated. And probably in a few months, and that the information is doubled. So I think in a 5 years' time, we will be having a more personalized treatment, and without huge side effects. And also, you are getting more inexpensive type of personalized treatment, because we can customize medicines and so forth. That is one. And the second thing is what we are doing in relation to the coping with the COVID, and in cooperation with the CEPI, and they are targeting to delivering more universal anti-vaccine and the solutions within 100 days. So I think the AI And the combination of this genomic advancement, we will be bringing like a more universal solutions for future epidemic things.
So just very quickly, 20 seconds each, do you think AI in healthcare can avoid another pandemic, particularly now as we're talking about monkeypox?
I think the capability is there, right? Even for the COVID, there were institutes that had predicted there were issues in Wuhan. It's just that no one acted on that data. I think there are a lot of hints that can be used with big data feeding in. I think countries should cooperate, and I think that will happen.
That is exactly what I'm doing, and we are doing together with the CEPI, and so we wanted to achieve it.
Morita-san, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for joining us here at Davos.
Thank you.